Since we had bought just a small bottle of red wine, my son-in-law David suddenly snapped at my husband James. Do you realize how much gas money that was? Easily enough to fill the whole tank. I've told you 100 times, you've got to cut back, save every penny you can. But you two? You throw money around like it grows on trees, wasting it on pointless luxury. Clearly annoyed, my daughter Rachel added, Mom, why didn't you check with me first? Do you honestly think our finances can handle you two spending like this? I watched helplessly as the color drained from James's face. Bit by bit, his features darkened until all that was left was quiet shame. My anger boiled over. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I pointed at David's expensive wristwatch, the one that cost him more than $6,000, and then at Rachel's designer purse, which she flaunted proudly and which easily cost $5,000. You two love to preach about saving money, right? So tell me this. David, how much did that watch cost? And Rachel, what about the purse you carry around? James and I live on nearly $7,000 a month in retirement, and now you're telling us we can't even enjoy a simple bottle of wine. Whose money are you really trying to save? Whose lives are you trying to control? We worked our entire lives just to give you a better life. We sacrificed so much. But that's not how we dreamed of our old age, being humiliated by our own children. Later that same day, James and I packed quietly and left their house. And just like that, panic set in. That day, while grocery shopping, we passed by a wine sale. James lingered for a long moment in front of the red wine display, hesitation flickering in his eyes. He'd always had a soft spot for those small batch reds with vintage labels. But living under Rachel's roof all these years, he rarely touched a drop. A mix of complicated emotions stirred inside me. I walked over and quietly selected his favorite bottle, placing it in our basket. Emily, he said softly behind me, starting to speak but trailing off. I gave him a gentle smile. Honey, it's our anniversary. A little good wine to celebrate. What's the harm? After dinner, just as James reached for the bottle, Rachel and David arrived. The moment the door swung open, the smell of alcohol filled the air. David stumbled into the living room, visibly drunk. I frowned immediately, irritation rising in my chest. He approached the dining table and abruptly stopped, staring at the bottle. You bought this? He asked sharply. James forced a small smile. It's been a while since we shared a drink. Thought we'd celebrate. But David erupted. That bottle cost enough to fill my gas tank. James tried to explain quickly. It was on sale. Just over $30. David's face darkened, his voice sharp and loud. Over $30 and you think that's cheap? I wouldn't buy it for myself. I've been saying all along, everything's getting expensive. We have to cut back. But you two, you don't care at all. Then he turned to Rachel, snapping, Why aren't you keeping your parents in check? Rachel jumped in without hesitation. Dad, that was so irresponsible. Why didn't you talk to me first? You know how tight things are right now. Owen's starting school soon. David's project still lacks funding. Money's going out in every direction and you're wasting it on this. I glanced at James. Just moments ago, he'd been cheerful. Now his face was sinking into sadness. A spark ignited inside me. I stood up and said firmly but calmly, I bought the wine. It had nothing to do with your father. Turning to them, my voice simmered with barely contained fury. You keep preaching about saving money, but what about your $6,000 watch, David? Or that $5,000 purse, Rachel? And let's be honest, they were charged to our retirement card. David tried to defend himself. That's different. I need the watch to look professional at work. Rachel added unapologetically, Dad, if I showed up with a cheap bag, people would laugh at me. I was shaking with anger. You all have your reasons, but what about us? James and I get nearly $7,000 a month in retirement, and you're telling us we can't enjoy a bottle of wine? Whose lives are you trying to budget? Are you trying to strip us of our dignity? Owen suddenly burst into tears, scared by the shouting. James scooped him up and murmured soothingly, Please, let's not fight. It's just a bottle of wine. If it's such a problem, I'll see if the store will take it back tomorrow. No, I said coldly, staring directly at Rachel and David. We're not so old that we need permission to enjoy our lives. That wine, I earned it. And if you want money, go get it yourself. Don't pin your hopes on us. If you want to be a real daughter, then start acting like one. With that, I took James's hand and returned to our room. That bottle of wine? James never drank it. The next morning, quietly, he gave it to our neighbors next door. Later that morning, David showed up looking embarrassed and remorseful. I drank too much last night, he muttered. Said a lot of stupid things. I feel terrible. Then he slapped himself twice and mumbled, I'm such a fool. Rachel followed him, putting on an overly guilty expression. We both had some wine last night, too, she said. We didn't mean to be so harsh. Dad, Mom, please don't take it to heart, okay? I looked at their forced smiles and fake apologies and snorted coldly. I didn't even bother to meet their eyes. Rachel noticed and immediately looked hurt. She turned to James. Dad? James sighed and gently patted my shoulder, speaking softly. We're family, Emily. There's no point holding grudges overnight. Let it go. His words softened some of the fire burning inside me. Seeing the mood thaw, Rachel quickly seized the chance. It's been a while since we all went out together. We have the day off. Why don't we get some fresh air? James, always the peacemaker, seemed eager to smooth things over and insisted we join them. We hadn't planned to shop much, just a casual walk. But when we reached downtown, a vintage clothing shop caught my eye. The window display showed a white dress with delicate blue flowers. I couldn't help but stop and stare. James noticed and chuckled softly. You like it? I nodded without hesitation. He opened the door and gently nudged me inside. The shop was full of beautiful vintage dresses, elegant patterns, fine fabrics. The one I'd been admiring hung right in the center. I walked over and brushed my fingers across the fabric, already falling in love. That dress was exactly the kind of style I used to adore in my younger days. But ever since we'd moved in with Rachel and started helping look after Owen, I hadn't worn anything like it. I still remembered the time David sneered at me. What are you trying to do, wearing those flowery dresses? You're not on vacation. After that, I stopped wearing them altogether. James noticed my hesitation. He called over a store assistant saying, Could you help my wife find her size in this one? I hesitated, unsure. At my age, wouldn't a dress like this look a bit silly on me? James smiled warmly and steadily. You loved this style once. Why would it not suit you now? The clerk joined in with encouragement. Every age has its own beauty. You have such lovely skin and a graceful presence. This dress would suit you perfectly. Bolstered by their kindness, I stepped into the fitting room. When I emerged wearing the dress, the clerk's eyes sparkled. She clapped her hands happily. Absolutely stunning! It's like it was made just for you. Nervously, I turned to James. What do you think? His gaze held such tenderness. Just as beautiful as ever. Standing in front of the mirror, I stared at the reflection of the woman wearing that familiar vintage style. And in that moment, I felt like I'd reclaimed a lost part of myself. My confidence, my elegance. The woman I almost forgot I was. Just as I reached for my card to pay, Rachel and David arrived, both lugging several large high-end shopping bags. Rachel, catching her breath, complained, this is exhausting. Mom, Dad, where did you wander off to? We've been looking everywhere. We're done shopping. Let's just head home. David fanned his neck, clearly irritated and not at all thrilled to be out. As Rachel stepped closer, her eyes landed on the floral vintage dress I wore. She froze for a moment, eyes widening as she surveyed the shop, then marched over to the price tags on the rack. Mom, is this really appropriate at your age? She asked, forcing a smile that barely hid her condescension. My smile faltered. What's wrong with it? James shot back with a cold chuckle. Is it the style you mind, or the price? He gestured toward their shopping bags. It's fine for you to spend hundreds on whatever you want, but when your mother buys a dress, suddenly it's a problem? Rachel's face shifted instantly. She quickly hid the bags behind her back and forced a smile in my direction. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. I was just being honest. Don't take it personally. You're 65. This dress is a little flashy. It doesn't exactly scream graceful. She nodded toward the passersby outside. Look around. Everyone dresses simply. Comfort matters most. Besides, you're always cooking, doing laundry, and chasing after Owen. How practical is a dress like that? Her gaze flickered to James as she muttered, and with that short haircut, honestly, it just looks strange. James's expression hardened. Ungrateful girl, do you even remember why your mother cut her hair? She loved her long hair once. His words hit me deep. Yes, I always wore it long, but when I started caring for Owen, he'd constantly pull my hair until it hurt. James scolded him, but Rachel and David didn't care. They only worried the kid might get scratched. They even blamed me. Eventually, I gave in and cut it off. It never grew back. The store clerk stepped in quickly to ease the tension. Actually, short hair has its own elegance. Paired with a vintage dress like this, it highlights a woman's character. There's grace and confidence in that combination. Rachel laughed sarcastically. Of course you'd say that. You're trying to make a sale. You folks could sell snow to an Eskimo. Turning to me, she said, Mom, I just passed a shop with clothes that look soft and lightweight. They're on sale. Much cheaper than this. That style might suit you better. We're walking past it anyway. Let's just stop in. The clerk looked embarrassed, offering only a polite smile before quietly stepping behind the counter. David joined in. Honestly, buying a dress like this is just a waste. You'd get more value spending that money on some good whiskey or fine cigars for me. In that moment, a deep, bone-chilling disappointment settled over me. It was painfully clear. That bottle of wine, this dress, anything we wanted to buy for ourselves, it would always be wasteful in their eyes. Only when money was spent on them did it become sensible or worthwhile. While James continued arguing with them, I slipped quietly into the fitting room and changed back into my dull gray dress, the one Rachel always called practical and appropriate. When I stepped out, the spark on my face was gone. The smile I'd worn moments ago faded into a pale shadow. James noticed, and his face fell. Without a word, he pulled out his wallet and handed the clerk our savings card. We'll take the dress, he said firmly. And please pick out a few more in her size. We'll take them all. Rachel and David's expressions shifted immediately. I reached for James's hand gently. He looked at me, steady and determined. After we paid, we left the store without looking back. On the way home, neither of us spoke. We stared silently out the window as the sun sank slowly behind the horizon. I glanced at James. The fading light painted his face a soft, solemn gray. My chest tightened with a dull ache. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. He looked at me, puzzled. I shook my head slightly. I'm fine, I whispered. But deep down, I knew something in me had shifted, completely and irrevocably. That night, Rachel and David went out again for another social dinner. At home, it was just James and me, with Owen sitting nearby, watching cartoons and refusing to eat. James sat quietly, his plate untouched, his face clouded in silence. James, I said softly, meeting his eyes. He lifted his head, his eyes heavy with fatigue. James, let's go back home, I said firmly but gently. He froze for a moment. A flicker of light flashed in his eyes, then faded, as if something crossed his mind and snuffed it out. I knew exactly what he was thinking. Just then, Owen jumped onto my side, eyes wide and bright. Grandma, did you say you're going somewhere? Are you moving out? Are you really leaving? I paused, smiled faintly and whispered, Maybe, sweetheart. But why are you so excited about that? I asked, watching Owen clap his hands with pure delight. Of course I'm excited, he beamed. Once you leave, Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna can come live here. His cheerful voice was oblivious to the chill settling in my heart as he continued. They love me so much. Every time we visit their house, they give me all sorts of snacks. Popcorn, Skittles, soda. But you guys never buy those for me. He paused for a moment, then added eagerly, I overheard Dad saying that once we move into the big house, you'll go back to your hometown, and then Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna will come live here. So if you're leaving now, does that mean I get to see them sooner? He bounced on his feet, glowing with excitement. Each of his words felt like icy water splashing against my chest. Jay and Anna, David's parents. The grandparents Owen adored most were the ones who hardly ever saw him, not the ones who cared for him day in and day out. Rachel and David had been planning to enroll Owen in a prestigious elementary school, but houses near the school were outrageously expensive, far beyond what their savings could cover. Even the money James and I had set aside wasn't enough for a down payment. Their plan became painfully clear to me. Sell our old family home back in our hometown to fund the down payment, drain our savings to renovate the new place, and once they sold the house they were living in, use that money to cover the mortgage. We only have one child, Rachel, James and I had always thought, assuming everything we owned would one day go to her. It felt natural, even right. But no, had David ever considered what would happen to us once our old house was sold? Where would we go? That house hadn't been lived in for over 10 years. It was crumbling, likely unlivable now. I stared at Owen's bright, eager face and felt nothing but cold emptiness. Does your mom know about all this? I asked softly. Of course, Owen replied without hesitation. Mom said she's going to take Grandpa and Grandma out to explore the city. They've never been here before. That night, James and I ate dinner in silence. Rachel and David came home late once more. I could hear the ruckus in the living room. It was obvious they'd been drinking. I sat awake for a long time, my mind turning over everything until my thoughts sharpened into something clear and cutting. Sleep was impossible. Tossing and turning, I turned toward James and whispered, "Do you remember the conversations we used to have before retirement?" I reached up, gently brushing the silver strands at his temple, then leaned in close to murmur in his ear. James froze, his eyes widening with surprise. I smiled quietly and squeezed his hand tighter. No further words were needed. The decision was made. Not long ago, the old house we'd listed with a real estate agent finally found a buyer. The moment Rachel and David heard the news, they were ecstatic and insisted on seeing the property themselves. They practically buzzed with excitement. When I told them James and I planned to handle the sale personally, they agreed immediately. David even offered to drive us to the airport. Just before leaving, Rachel reminded us repeatedly not to worry about Owen and to finalize the sale quickly. David handed me a bank card and said, "Have the buyer transfer the payment to this account. It's going toward the new house anyway." With their hopeful eyes watching us, James and I set off for our hometown. But just before boarding the plane, I tossed that bank card into a trash bin at the airport. The first thing we did after arriving was open a new bank account and redirect our retirement payments there. Over the next few days, we finalized the house sale and cleared out most of our belongings, except for a few old jackets James cherished. Everything else was left behind. 2 weeks later, the southern coast welcomed us with warm, breezy evenings. Sitting on the porch of the small cottage we'd rented, James and I enjoyed freshly brewed coffee and dinner. That's when his phone rang. It was Rachel. He answered, but before he could speak, her irritated voice flooded the line. "Dad, it's been 2 weeks. Has the house sold or not? When are you coming back?" She sounded frantic. "We've picked out the new place, but it's a hot market. The agent's only holding it a few more days. We practically begged for that. If you don't sign the contract soon, we'll lose it." She paused, then added sharply, "And by the way, your retirement check didn't come through this month. You'd better call the bank and figure out what's wrong." James calmly put down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and replied evenly, "Oh, right. There's something we forgot to tell you. Your mother and I decided to take a trip. We're not coming back." A stunned silence followed on the other end. Then her voice shot up an octave. "What? You're not coming back? What about the new house you want?" James maintained his steady tone. "We don't think it's necessary, especially since you don't have the savings to afford it, do you? And that retirement check you're talking about, it went through fine, just not to the account you're expecting. We changed it." Silence. Then Rachel's voice returned, sharp and shrill. James pulled the phone slightly away from his ear, but her words rang out clearly. "What are you talking about? The house isn't sold, you're not coming back, you moved the retirement money. What are we supposed to do?" she shouted. "Dad, answer me! Mom, are you there? Mom!" James hung up without a word. Within seconds, my phone lit up too, but James reached over, declined the call, and silenced his phone. I stared at my screen for a moment, hesitant, then quietly asked, "James, are we really doing the right thing? What if Rachel hates us for this? What if she never forgives us?" He took my hand gently and said softly, "I know what you're worried about. You're thinking she's our only daughter, the one we poured all our love into, the hope of our lives. Everything we saved, everything we worked for, it all felt like it should go to her." And for years, you gave her everything she asked for without hesitation. I thought that was just what parents do, but they've made it clear. Our kindness means nothing to them. If we gave them our house and retirement money, do you really think we'd have a place in their future? Would they care for us when we needed them most? I sat quietly for a long time, his words echoing in my mind. You know, he said softly, we give up everything out of fear, fear of aging, of illness, of death. We convince ourselves it's safer to depend on them, to hand over control and hope they'll carry us through. But what exactly are we getting in return? Do you honestly believe it would have been any better than this? That evening, I found myself sitting alone outside for what felt like hours. The last glimmers of sunset faded slowly beyond the horizon as night quietly settled in. The following morning, I carefully brushed my hair and slipped into my favorite dress. When James saw me standing there once more, poised with quiet self-assurance, a long, relieved breath escaped him. From that day onward, the world gained two sunset companions, a couple who had completely walked away from the storm of family drama, choosing instead a simple life dedicated solely to one another. We rented a small, inviting house with a garden nestled in a warm and tranquil southern town, just steps from a serene, shimmering lake. Each morning, we strolled along the lake's edge, sometimes on foot, sometimes biking or jogging. Afterwards, we would make our way to the local farmer's market to gather fresh ingredients for the day's meals. If time allowed, we'd hop into the car and explore nearby towns, forest trails, or peaceful coves, always chasing moments of natural beauty. James donned his favorite loose button-down shirts and wide-brimmed hat, while I carried my camera, capturing the calmness and grace reflected in his eyes. I began caring for myself again. For 4 years living with Rachel, I'd worn loose, strapless garments and kept my hair cropped short out of practicality. Nothing more. But now, I allowed it to grow once again. I don't mind the convenience of short hair, I told James one day, gently running my fingers through my strands. But I missed the softness and elegance of long hair. As it grew to the nape of my neck, I started pinning it up into the elegant chignon I once loved, pairing it with my treasured vintage dresses. James would always smile when he looked at me. You're even more beautiful now than you were back then, he would say. After lunch, we'd take brief naps. Afternoons found James settled by the window with a book while I dived into photography and video editing. Lost in our separate little worlds, the hours slipped away quietly. Every few weeks, we took short excursions, visiting quaint towns, coastal roads, and quiet harbors. Our footsteps slowly mapped the places we discovered together. On one such trip, we met a young man named Chris, a traveling content creator. Curious, I checked his social media. Over 20 million followers. What made us laugh was how fast he dubbed himself my biggest fan and begged to call me his godmother. I always thought vintage style was for people like my mom, he admitted. But meeting you showed me real style is something you live, not just wear. His mother and grandmother had both been enthusiasts of vintage culture. So encountering a woman his mother's age who still embraced her own beauty and identity sparked in him a genuine warmth and respect. Since then, I became not just the quiet subject of James's photos, but the vibrant muse behind Chris's lens. With my blessing, he shared clips of us online, and to everyone's surprise, they went viral. It was those tender glimpses into our life that finally drew Rachel and David out of silence after over 6 months. They appeared exhausted, eyes red-rimmed and weary from sleepless nights. Over the months, they had called relentlessly and sent numerous messages, all of which I ignored. So their frantic faces now hardly surprised me. Dad! Rachel burst through the door, voice strained and urgent, face a jumble of emotion. You and Mom disappeared without a word. We've searched everywhere. I even went back to the old house, it's sold, and yet you're still not coming back. Why? David said nothing, instead wandering into the garden and sinking into a chair as if that act alone resolved everything. I rose and took a seat at the table. Rachel stared at me for a moment before asking, Mom? David suddenly straightened, glancing at James then me, scratching his head awkwardly. It's good to see you again, Catherine. You look younger than ever. I barely recognized you. I snorted coldly, choosing silence. If you want to say something, say it now. We're heading to the market soon. Only then did Rachel and David realize we were not interested in pleasantries. Rachel jumped up. What market? Let's just pack up and go home. It's been over 6 months. You missed your chance on the last house, and it's gone. We found another. Not as nice, but good enough. We need to move on this. Once we're back, we can put down the money and secure it. So that was the truth. They hadn't come for us, but for the money. I sneered silently, refusing to respond. David glanced at Rachel. She immediately slid next to me, looping her arm around mine with fake warmth. Mom, are you still mad about the dress? I swear I didn't know how much you loved vintage styles. Honestly, you look stunning. If you want, I'll buy you a few every season. Different looks to switch things up. She sighed. Owen's been crying every day, missing you. He's barely eating and has lost weight. It breaks my heart. You raised him from the beginning. He can't live without you. Don't you care? I smiled faintly. If I like a dress, I can buy it myself. As for Owen, there's more than one person in his life who loves him. I just want to spend my remaining days peacefully with your dad. Then I gently pulled my arm free and stood. You should go, I said calmly, moving toward the garden gate. My voice was steady and final. Live within your means. If you want a house, pay for it yourselves. We're not coming back. Rachel froze briefly, then sprang up, face flushed with frustration, voice sharp. So that's it? You're cutting us off? What happens when you're old and sick? Who will care for you then? We never counted on you for that, I said plainly, waving my hand dismissively. Turning to David, I added softly, You brought your parents here, didn't you? He blinked, glanced at me sideways, then nodded slowly. I chuckled softly. You didn't even need to ask. We stepped aside willingly. Now your little family is together again early. I bet Owen's thrilled. His eyes widened, body frozen. Rachel's face drained of color, her expression mirroring David's, rigid, stunned, utterly speechless. Just then a familiar voice rang out from the gate. Hey, Catherine, James, weren't we supposed to hit the farmer's market together this morning? What happened? Chris appeared at the entrance, grinning as he stepped into the garden. The moment he saw Rachel and David, he froze briefly, then quickly pieced it together. Ah, so it's you two. No wonder they ditched the market today. Turning to me with a bright smile, he said, Kath, aren't you going to introduce me to your friends? David's face twisted instantly into fury. Oh, I see how it is, he spat bitterly, jabbing a finger at Chris. No wonder you don't want to come back home. You've been completely charmed by this punk. Think I don't know what you're after? Cozying up to two old folks pretending to be sweet? Don't think I don't see through you. You're after their money, aren't you? Do you even know whose money that is? You've got some nerve, you little parasite. Like a bull sensing blood, David charged at Chris. My heart clenched. David was tall and heavy-set. Chris was younger, lean, and wiry. If it came to blows, I wasn't sure Chris could hold his own. I started to rise, ready to intervene. Then, a sharp, heavy thud. With a swift, fluid motion, Chris flipped David over his shoulder and slammed him onto the ground. David hit hard and groaned, sprawled out, unable to get up. Chris dusted off his sleeves, frowning down at him. Really? That's all you've got? James and I were frozen for a beat, then burst out laughing. Who would have guessed this quiet young man packed such power? Rachel and David left empty-handed and thoroughly humiliated. Their resentment was palpable, but there was nothing they could do but slink away defeated. A few days later, James and I packed our bags again, preparing for our next journey. Chris arrived with an invitation from his mother. After seeing my photos and his videos, she'd expressed a strong wish to meet me. After some thought, we gladly accepted. Arriving in the seaside city and stepping into her home, I was stunned. Chris's mother was someone I'd admired for years, a renowned vintage fashion designer named Claire Stone. Back when I was still working, I'd discovered one of her vintage runway shows online. I'd been captivated by the elegant silhouettes and intricate details. Since then, I'd quietly dreamed of wearing one of her creations. But life, family, responsibilities, endless chores had slowly pushed that dream aside. Now, standing there, I felt only gratitude for the choices I'd made. I was finally living for myself. Claire and I connected instantly. We talked at length about vintage fashion, femininity, and the art of timeless style. She showed me around her studio, pausing before a mannequin draped in fabric. With pride shining in her eyes, she lifted the cloth. "This," she said, "is my proudest creation. But since finishing it, I've never found the right person to wear it. I've tried models, celebrities, none captured the spirit I imagined. Then I saw you in Chris's video and knew this dress was made for you." The moment I slipped into that vintage dress, I felt it too. It wasn't just a perfect fit, it was harmony of style and soul. What once looked like an ordinary floral pattern bloomed on me with poise and warmth. Claire immediately invited me to close her upcoming vintage runway show in that very dress. I was ecstatic, giddy like a young girl chasing her dreams for the first time. To prepare, I trained 2 hours daily, practicing my walk and refining my posture. It wasn't easy at first. James would watch, drenched in sweat, gently worried. "Don't push yourself too hard." I always smiled and said, "I've spent most of my life just surviving. For the first time, I finally feel alive." He stopped trying to stop me. Instead, he quietly supported me, managing everything backstage to make sure I had what I needed. On show day, I stepped onto the runway as the finale. No one expected a woman past 60 to steal the spotlight, but I felt no nerves. My makeup was flawless, my steps confident and graceful, every movement radiating ease. The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, all eyes on me. In that moment, I felt 20 again, bold, radiant, unstoppable. I spotted James in the front row, pride and love shining in his eyes. Suddenly, my heart fluttered like a girl in love for the very first time. Soon after, the runway video went viral. People weren't just amazed by my appearance. They were moved by my refusal to surrender to age, by my choice to live life on my own terms. They called me the vintage goddess. But what no one expected was that James became a sensation too. A photo captured him in the front row, eyes glowing with admiration as he watched me walk. Chris edited together a video of James bustling backstage, helping with shoes and accessories. Comments flooded in. "This is what true love looks like." James and I read that and quietly laughed. Touching and surreal. Afterward, invitations to fashion events poured in. Time passed quietly, but never dimmed the light in our eyes. Then one day I saw Rachel again, at another vintage fashion show. The event had just ended when she burst out from a corner and dropped to her knees before me. It had been 6 months since we last saw her. She looked transformed, hair messy, face haggard, much thinner, eyes full of exhaustion and defeat. "Mom! Dad!" she cried, voice breaking. Suddenly remembering something, she spun and shouted toward a corner. "Owen! Come! Say hi to Grandma and Grandpa!" She'd brought Owen, but the boy clung desperately to the wall, crying uncontrollably. "I don't want them! I want Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna!" Rachel tried pulling him over, but he refused to move. Frustrated, she began pushing and shoving, even hitting him in desperation. Owen's sobs grew louder, echoing through the nearly empty venue. The chaos drew attention instantly. People gathered, murmuring, pointing, whispering. With the help of the security staff, we managed to escort Rachel and Owen into a quiet backstage lounge. Finally, away from the noise, Rachel opened up about everything that had happened. Over the past 6 months, David had been arrested on charges of bribery and corruption. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. I froze for a moment, but the longer I thought about it, the less surprised I became. David had always been arrogant and reckless, chasing shortcuts instead of doing things the right way. For years, they had been using our accounts to build credit, grease palms, and secure favors. I had warned him once, "Do what you're capable of. Don't fake your way through everything." But he sneered, "That's such old-fashioned thinking. These days, it's all about leverage and connections. If there's a shortcut, only a fool wouldn't take it." That memory stayed with me, the quiet chill that ran through my bones. I knew trouble was coming. Sure enough, he pulled the same stunt again to win a city development contract. He even mortgaged their house to take out a loan and secure the necessary connections. Though he got the contract, he neglected the work, drowning himself in dinners and booze. The project collapsed under his mismanagement, causing massive financial losses. This was the inevitable end. Rachel broke down, sobbing. Since he went to prison, I've been afraid to leave the house. Neighbors whisper behind my back, and kids at school tease Owen. I'm falling apart. Mom, Dad, he's just a child. That environment is toxic for him. I want to bring him here to live with you. Her eyes were filled with desperate hope. James responded calmly. Didn't Owen say he loves being with his real grandparents? Now your little family is back together. It seems like a perfect fit. Rachel panicked. Dad, they don't know how to care for him. They don't even love him. They don't know what he's allergic to. The last time he had a severe reaction to nuts, he went into shock. They weren't home. They left him alone. If I hadn't gotten back in time, it could have been fatal. James shook his head, unmoved. That's your responsibility. If his grandparents are careless, then as his mother, you need to be more responsible. Rachel grasped at another angle. But the loan David took is due. I have no way to repay it. The bank's going to foreclose on the house. Where are Owen and I supposed to live? James remained steady. When the house is auctioned, you'll get whatever remains. That should be enough for you and your son. David's childhood home is still there. You won't end up on the street. Rachel's face went pale, rage and despair battling behind her eyes. She turned to me in tears. Mom, please say something. I looked at her without emotion and said clearly, Your father's right. Rachel froze. In that moment, she knew there was no turning back. She covered her mouth and fled, sobbing. The media, as usual, quickly pounced on the story. The moment Rachel knelt before me at the fashion show was caught on video. It spread like wildfire online, and suddenly, James and I were viral again. Though this time, praise was drowned out by criticism. Internet commentators flooded forums with condemnation. They argued that today's soaring living costs and overwhelming pressures left young people struggling to juggle careers and parenting. Even small help from elderly parents, cooking dinner or picking up children, could mean everything. But what about us? They asked. We were selfish, choosing comfort and leisure while ignoring our daughter's hardships. According to them, we were cold, ungrateful, even cruel. As their voices grew louder, those who once called me the vintage goddess fell silent. Some even began to question themselves. They imagined what it would be like if their own parents did the same, if they too gave up and distanced themselves from family duties. Suddenly, our story no longer seemed admirable. Support turned into judgment. Yet amid the noise, another voice quietly emerged. People closer to our age, those tethered to their adult children's lives, unpaid caretakers washing dishes, changing diapers, giving away savings bit by bit. People who couldn't enjoy a nice dinner or buy a new dress without checking their children's moods first. They spoke out. Raising children was our duty. But does that mean we must be lifelong servants, free nannies, personal chefs, even after they build their own families? That sentiment struck a chord. What began as a murmur grew into a chorus, a quiet but undeniable shift in public discourse. At first, James worried about me. He feared the emotional roller coaster, from adoration to outrage, might overwhelm me. But I was untroubled. I smiled and said, We never sought to be public figures. The applause was a beautiful accident, and that was enough. If it fades tomorrow, I'll have no regrets. There are still so many places to explore. Even the most breathtaking view is only a pause along the journey. You absorb its beauty, then keep moving. Holding on too tightly only weighs you down. Life lies ahead. But finding peace didn't mean I would let cruel accusations go unanswered. So I sat down and wrote an article. For 5 years, we lived in our daughter's home, caring for her family, never daring to spend on ourselves. One day, in a good mood and because it was our anniversary, we bought a bottle of wine to celebrate. What happened next? We were accused of being wasteful and extravagant, all while they drained our retirement accounts on $6,000 watches and $5,000 designer bags. Our savings supported their lifestyle, yet we were scolded for spending a few dollars on discounted wine. Even when Rachel tried to win us back, it was manipulation disguised as affection. We chose to walk away, not out of abandonment, but because we realized sacrifice is not love, and entitlement is not filial duty. As I typed, the memories lost their sting. The pain faded. What remained was clarity. Strangely, I even felt grateful to Rachel and David. Because of them, James and I finally broke free from fear of aging, illness, and dying alone. We began a new chapter, one wholly our own. After publishing, Chris commented beneath the article. He wrote about mornings near us, James making breakfast, me hanging laundry in the garden, photos of me smiling in a vintage dress in sunlight. He said, they didn't abandon anyone. They just learned after being hurt how to protect themselves. And just like that, the angry comments began to quiet. One reply stood out. When you become a parent and your own child treats you the same way, will you still call that selfish? Because all we had done, after being drained, dismissed, discarded, was choose to stop giving more. Even in old age, we still have the right to live the life we want.